All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam. Hilchos B'choros Perek Shemini, and God willing, we're going to start Hilchos Shgogos prakim Aleph and Beis. So first, we're going to learn the final chapter of the laws of B'choros. And as we started to learn already the mitzvah of separating from every 10 animals one, the way we began to describe the procedure yesterday, now we're going to have unbelievable scenarios where mistakes are made in the counting of the 10 and the effect of such mistakes. This chapter has 15 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says the Rambam, a person brought his sheep into the corral, as we described yesterday, right? You cause the animals to go out on their own. You have a very narrow passageway, and the owner is standing and counting ideally with a staff, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then he says, and the 10th is designated holy to God, and he smears red paint on the back of the 10th. That is the way it should be done. And what happened over here is as one by one are going out, and he's counting them, as we described in the 7th chapter, and he made a mistake in the number. So I guess if his mistake was Vikara Lashmini, if the 8th or Shalamat Mimenu, or the 7th or the 6th, he says this is the 10th. In other words, he was 2 off or more than 2 off, lower or higher. Or Shikara, or the 12th, or a number bigger than 12, he called the 10th. Loinaskachu, despite the fact that he called it the 10th, they are going to be considered the ordinary animals. However, but if number 9, if the 9th, if he calls the 11th, if he says the word 10th, asiri, to a certain degree, in the skachu, they will become sanctified, as we'll describe. And the davars of nishma. And this is something that we have by oral tradition. Shahatos, that when a person makes a mistake, and normally when a person is magdish something erroneously, it has no effect. Here it will have an effect. But mikadeshes b'maiser shelemaylu mimenu v'shelamati mimenu, it will have an effect, but only if the number was 1 up or 1 down. Avaloi shelefneihem nor v'shelachadeihem. But if you are 2 off or more, then it will have no such effect. Now, let's give various scenarios where such a mistake was made. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Afilu karalachi asiri. And when the 9th came out, the person made a mistake and he says 10th. And then he realized, I made a mistake. I skipped 9. So when the 10th went out, he thought he'll make it better. He'll call that the 9th. And then Vilasirichi, then he made another mistake. Once he called the 10th 9th, what comes after 9? 10. So when the 11th came out, instead of saying 11, he said 10. This is this mistake, whether he did that bikavana, whether he did it by mistake, whether he did it intentionally for whatever reason. So the din will be shlashtan mikudashin. All 3 of them will be sanctified, but as we will see, not on the same level. What do we do in this scenario? In other words, he said the word 10th on the 9th. He said 9th on the 10th. And then he said 10th on the 11th. Hachi einokar. The 9th cannot be brought. In other words, it does have a certain amount of kedusha, but it was not the 10th. Elonechel b'muma, you have to wait until it gets blemished, and then it won't be worse than any other meiser behema. Any meiser behema, if it gets blemished, becomes again property of its owner, could be eaten. Now the 10th is meiser, even though he called it the 9th. But the 11th that he called the 10th has to be offered as a shlamim. In other words, once you have meiser, which is now the 10th, who we call the 9th, is meiser, you can't have 2 meisers. You have to have the second meiser will be when you come to the 20th, not when you come to the 11th. But on the other hand, you called it the 10th. And we have mipi hashmua, that it imbues it with kedusha, but it becomes mukdash as a shlamim. and it needs nesachim like a shlamim. However, one nuance: it's not a normal shlamim. It cannot make a tamura. And as we will learn when we'll learn hilchos tamura shortly, that even though tamura is something that you may not do, but if I consecrated this animal, animal A, and then I go over to animal B, and I tell animal B that you are a substitution for animal A. Animal A remains solely, and animal B gets that type of kedusha. But once an animal is already a substitution, the substitution cannot be the cause of another substitution. So since he didn't call this a shlamim, he called this the 10th, it becomes a shlamim. It's like a tamura. So if someone now points to this 11th, then he has another animal, and he says the other animal should be like the 11th, it will have no effect at all. Now, the complete scenario above is if the one that counted, again, whether it was b'ta'us, whether it was b'kavana, in our scenario, 3 animals will have some level of kedusha. That's if the owner did that. But if someone appointed a shliach to tithe his animals on his behalf, and that person made a mistake, whether it wasn't the 9th, whether it wasn't the 11th, only the 10th becomes consecrated because of the rule. When I appoint you as my proxy, I only appointed you to do something to my benefit. I didn't appoint you to make a mistake and to cause me a loss. This that we just said, that that if he called 11th, if he said 10th, the 11th becomes Miscarriage as a shlamim. That's only because the 10th he called the 9th. The fact that he called the 9th 10th, that's less significant because the 9th was taka, not the 10th. Taka mugdash, but you can only eat it the mumai. The 10th he called the 9th. So the 11th that he called the 10th has kedusha shlamim. Avalim karel asiri asiri. But if he called the 10th, and for whatever reason he called the 11th again the 10th, then loinis kadosh achados. The 11th does not become holy at all because shahadei asiri havadai loyakar shem asiri mi'olam. The fact that the name 10th he did not remove from the 10th. So now the 11th will have nothing. Bafilu yatsu asiri. Even if when the 10th one came out. He did not call it anything. He didn't call it 10th. He didn't call it 11th. He was quiet. That's a very big cloud. That means even if he didn't call the 10th the 10th automatically becomes Ma'aseh Behema. And then he called the 11th 10th. Also lo yiskadesh at all. Because Shoasiri me'atzmo yiskadesh afal pi shelo koro asiri. Hoyel, the hoyel v'loyakar shem asiri me'olav ein achad asor mugdash. So that's gewaldig. But here in Halacha Aleph, what happened? He called the 10th 9th. He uprooted the name 10th. And even though it's Taka Ma'aseh Behema. But now when he calls the 11th 10th, it becomes a Shlam. Halacha Dalet is a new case. And my friends, the whole chapter will go in such different types of scenarios. Yotzat Shiv Asiri Ke'echad. If when it came to the number 9 and 10, both animals worked out together. Whether the owner called them 10th on the 2 animals, whether he called them 9th on the both animals, both of them are Mikudashim. Neither of them can be brought. V'ye'achlu b'muman. V'ye'achlu b'muman. Now let me explain the ve'enam kerevim. You have to wait until they're blemished and they cannot be brought. Now, the Rambam put together 2 scenarios, but they both work based on different formulas. And let's just speak it out. When he called both of them 10th, so what's the din we learned in Halacha Aleph? The 10th taka becomes Ma'aseh Behema. The 9th becomes holy, but it cannot be put on the Mizbech. You have to wait until it gets blemished. Since we don't know which one is the 9th, which one is the 10th, so now both of them, you have to wait until they get blemished. Push it. That's the scenario over there. Now, when he calls both of them 10, so what did we learn? When you call the 10th, not only does the 10th become the 10th, but the 11th is Chulin. So now you have Chulin and Ma'aseh Behema mixed together. Here also you cannot offer them. The same thing will be, I'm sorry, if the 9th and the 10th, whether you call them 9th or 10, whether you call them 9 or 10, no. In this case, always, the 10th is the 10th. When you call both of them the ninth, so then the ninth is chulin and the 10th is, like we said, the 10th is Maisa Behema. Chulin and Maisa Behema. When you call both of them 10, it's not chulin and Maisa Behema. Then the ninth has a certain amount of kedusha because you call the ninth the 10th. But it's a kedusha, like we learned in Allah Aleph, that you cannot offer around the Mizbeach. So in both cases, like the Rambam says, that you have to wait until they get blemished. Now, if what happened was 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but now instead of the 10th going out by itself, 2 animals walked out. If you called on both of them 10th, so like we said, the 10th is the 10th, the 11th is chulin and Meiser Sheni and Meiser Behema, that's mixed up together. And it's like a Meiser Shenasar of the Shlamim. There's nothing you can do. That's if you call both of them the 10th. So in such a case, interestingly, the 11th will become a shlamim. But if you call both of them the 11th, so then the 11th is nothing. The 11th is chulin. The 10th becomes holy. Now it's like asiri v'chulin meravan zebozeh and the achlu b'muman. And before, what you need to do is you have to redeem one of them in order for you to be able to eat them. That's a big difference between when you called both of them the 10th or whether you called both of them the 11th. Very good. Now, another case, halacha. His chalib noise, you're starting to have the animals walk out of the corral. And from the outset, instead of you making a passageway through which only one animal fits, which is what you should have done, for whatever reason, 2 animals are going out at the same time. And what you did is, and this is the right thing, not 1, 2. Since 2 animals walked out, you said 1 on the pair. You're good. Keep on doing that. When the next 2 walk out, say 2 on the pair. Even though you had 4 animals, it doesn't matter. Even though when the 5th pair walks out, you have now one of them is the 10th. It doesn't matter. You're calling that the 5th. What will happen is that when the 10th pair will walk out, you will call that pair 10th. And both of those animals will become Meiser Behema. Same thing if 3 animals come out at a time. Fine. Say 1 on the triplets. Say 2 on the next 3. And then when it's really going to be 28, 29, 30, which is the 10th triplet, you'll say 10th. Or 5 and 5. That's what you should do. Because you consecrate over here a group. Now let's build on that. 2 animals walked out at first. So you said 1, but you were not referring to 1 animal, 1 pair. But from then on, only 1 animal walked out at a time. So what you did was, the kara hashlishi, the 3rd animal, which is the 2nd time the animal walked out, first time 2 walked out, now only 1 walked out. You say 2. Now it's not consistent because 1 was on a pair. 2 should have been on a pair. Here he's saying 2 on 1 animal. It's gavaldik. In this case, the 9th and the 10th will both become sanctified. Why? Like we learned in Allah Aleph, because the 9th is really the 10th animal. You got it? Because number 1 was 2. And what did we learn? That when you call the 10th the 9th, then the 11th becomes a shlamim. That's exactly what happens. And now they're mixed together. Says the no. So the Rambam is saying that even when they're not mixed together, in the case of Allah Aleph, Taka, the 10th would really be Meiser Behema, and the 11th will be a shlamim. But here we have a doubt, since the first that went out, which was a pair, that you called 1, are they 1 or are they 2? That doubt affects to the point that not the 10th, Yechap, and not the 9th can be offered. Because we don't know which one is really the 10th. And weiter v'yachal b'muman. Hachi mepnei shu asiri havadai. Sharei shnaim yatzu tchila. It is the 10th. V'zeh shekaroi asiri, and if that will be the case, then the one that you call the 10th is the 11th. And if that would have been the case, then it would have been meiser behem and shlamim. But maybe that's not the din. But maybe not. Like we said, maybe the first two was considered only one. And if that's the case, the 9th is nothing. And the 10th is meiser behema, not a shlamim. So because of that doubt, you have to wait for both of them to get blemished. Halacha zayin, just to remember that whenever there is a possibility that one animal is a shlamim, it's not just enough for it to be blemished, but if it's a shlamim, as we're going to learn on Hilchos Psuli HaMukdashim, you have to first deconsecrate it, misafek, and then use that money for a shlamim. Halacha zayin, a new case. If you're counting them backwards, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. So we already introduced this, that really it's not your counting that does it. Since this is the 10th, that becomes consecrated. And like we mentioned, if you're not counting at all, if the 10th who goes out will become holy regardless. Now, you called the 9th the 10th, which is what we had in the beginning of this chapter. You went from 8 to 10. And we already said that we learned from tradition that animal has some kedusha, but it cannot be brought. And the 10th didn't even leave the corral. So says the Rambam what we learned in the beginning of this chapter, which is that the 9th, what about the 10th now? If the 10th did not yet go out, says the Rambam, if you began with 10 animals, that means the one in the corral, which is the only one standing, is the 10th. Meiser. Even though it didn't go out because of this rule, excuse me, it became consecrated by now. If there's more than one animal left, you don't know which one is the 10th. We're speaking about a case where there's only one left. Now what happens if the 10th died? So first of all, because you called the 9th the 10th. All of the 8 that already walked out, they don't have to be tithed again. This is a very important rule that will play itself out almost until the end of this chapter. Even though the 10th was not consecrated for it to be offered because it died. So why are the first 8 exempt? Now this is the cloud. These are the words. Animals that have been counted in a manner that it was fitting for them to be tithed, which was the case because there were 10 animals in the corral. When the first 8 went out, at that time, there were 2 left. So everything was ra'ui to happen. Even though at the end, it didn't work out, they are exempt. Remember this rule. And now let's apply it. Halacha 9, applied in other cases. If you bring 10 lambs, right, into a corral and you're counting one of those who were already counted, they are out, died, they were counted, that's fine. You don't have to say, now that I know that number 7 died, maybe number 8 should be number 7. No, number 8 is number 8. Even though at the end, when you're going to call the 10th, you don't have 10, you have 1 less. Doesn't matter. Because that's another application. In other words, animals are being counted. While you're doing the counting, everything is fitting for it to come to a number 10. You don't redo anything. Now you had 10. Not the one that already walked out, that was already counted, died. One that's in the corral died, wasn't counted yet. Well, that cannot be counted. But again, elu shenimnu turim. The ones that were already counted don't have to be recounted. Now, you have to remember, the case of halacha yud is you're only starting out with 10. So let's say you count 5 walked out. They were already counted. From the 5 remaining, one of them died. So you don't have 5 left, you only have 4 left. Going forward, there's nothing else to count because now you know that even if all of the 4 will go out, you won't hit number 10. So the other 4 you have to wait. If you don't have more animals, wait until the next goyim of that year, as we learned yesterday. It's gewaldig. But the first 5 are good. Now let's spice this concept up. You begin with 14 lambs and you bring them into the corral. Now, there are 2 doors in the corral right now. When 4 worked out from the door on the right, you counted them. And then the next 6 walked out from another door. How many do you have left, guys? You only have 4 left. Now here, we will say now that if these 4 would go out from door number 1, how many walked out now from door number 1? The total, 4 and 4, that's only 8. So now that it is like this. Now, you have 4 left in the corral. If the 4 that are in there are going to walk out from the door number 2 that we're calling, from which walked out the 6. So from that door, you have a total of 8. Not only will the 10 that walked out of door number 2 be exempt, even the first 4 are exempt. Why? Because of the rule that we keep on learning. When the first 4 walked out, how many were still left in the corral? Not only 6, you had 10 left. As far as you're concerned, all of the other 10 could have gone out from door number 1. You would have hit the 10th. In other words, they were counted in a manner that was fitting for them to be tied, so they are exempt. Now, however, if the fact is the final 4 walked out of door number 1, the first 4 and the first 6, first 4 and the second 6 are exempt because when the 4 walked out, there were 10 left. When the 6 went out from door number 2, that was still good because there was still a total of 10. So those 4, the first 4 and the second 6 are good. But the final 4, this is gewaldig. Even though they went out of door number 1 second, the final 4, the moment they began going out of door number 1, that's not minyan haroi because 4 and 4 is only 8. Ain't a minyan haroi. So those 4, if they walked out of door number 1, you have to take them and you have to put them back in the goyden. You have to put them back in the corral when it comes to the next goyden in that year, as we learn. Mamish gewaldig. Yotzu Arbam Pesach Zeh. If 4 walked out of door A, 4 walked out of door B, and now you have 6 inside, now it's much better. Because these 6, no matter what door they walk out from, you're going to come to a minyan haroi. Im yatzu hashisha me'echad mishnei psachim, noitel echad mehem ma'ased vekulan peturim. Only problem will be if the final 6 won't go all out of one door. Im yatzu hashisha mishnei psachim. Now you had 4 and 3 is 7. Yechap. So none of these 6 are good. But the first 8, the 4 and the 4 are good. Because when the first 4, and even when the second 4 went out, there was still 6 left in the corral. Minyan haroi is pointed. You got it. Halacha Yudal. Another case, you have now not 14, you have 19 shepsalach inside a corral, and the yatzu tishma pesach zeh. And then you had 9 that went out of the other door. So you have now 1 left. Regardless which opening this one goes through, it's meiser, it's gavaldik. Like that we already learned above, that when you have only 10, and therefore once 9 walked out, that is the 10th that becomes consecrated. And that will be effective for both 9 and 9. Kulam peturim. Since from the perspective of door number 1, 9 went out, there's 1 left, it can go out from door number 1. From the perspective of door number 2, the 1 left can go out of door number 2. So those 18 are exempt, and the 1 inside automatically becomes mugdash. Oh, what's that going out? If Rosh Verube went out, it's considered as if it's counted. If you're counting, and the hifse coming in, you interrupted. You took a pause, or it got Shabbos, and animals are muktzah. Number 1. Number 2, we're not ma'aser on Shabbos, right? With the Rabbanan, you're being mesaken mana. It doesn't matter that there was an interruption as long as you continue doing what you're doing. Even though you're doing it 25, 26 hours later, you're good. So you have many. The 10th is holy, then the 20th is holy. Every time you go back to number 1, 10th, 10th, 10. And one of the animals that were already counted jumped back into the corral. Listen to this. Now the animals that were already exempted cannot be tithed again. Now you have a mixture. So what happens? Nifteru hakoil. Shekol echad mehem safek im hu hamon shekafot zoyacher. And the kvar beyarnu shekol hamenuyim are going to be potted. Wow! And now the final halacha Yudalid was one of the animals that were not meiser jump back in. But what happens in kafat echad minu asiru l'toichadid? The meiser behema jump back in. Now you have a big difference. Before you have an animal that's exempt, so you can't count it. Here you have an animal that is meiser behema, elamites mixed up. So you will have to wait, and it's not batal. Here it's going to be l'chumra. So what happens? Kulam yiru achel b'mum, and now v'yeh achlu b'muman. Mamash chevra mazel tov, brich rachmana desayon, and that concludes the series of Hilchas B'chayros. And now we are starting with the next series of Hilchas Gagois, the laws of sacrifices that are offered to atone for what we will call inadvertent transgressions, as we'll have a lot that defined even today in today's chapter 1 and chapter 2. All right. So first of all, yesh b'chlol chamesh mitzvahs asay v'zeu pratan. Number 1, sheyakrev hayochad korban chatas kavua al shgagasoi, as we'll see a chatas kavua. Now, whether you are a hedyot, whether you are the nasi, whether you are the kohen hamashuach, it will depend. But it's an animal and not a chatos that will be adjusted according to your wealth, as we'll see. So there's the din of the chatas kavua. Number 2, beishi yakrev asham mishalei noidaloi im chata im loy chata. And when you bring the asham, we're going to speak about the asham talui, where it's called a provisional guilt offering. You're not covered when later, if later you discovered that indeed you sinned, then you'll have to bring a carbon chatas. It only prevents punishment until such a point. And then v'yavi chatas. That's called the asham talui. And then you have 3, sheyakrev achoyta asham. There are certain karbonos asham guilt offerings that are bought for definitive sins, definitive transgressions. Alaveris yaduas. That's going to be called asham vadei. The 4th mitzvah that will be covered in this series is sheyakrev achoyta karban alaveris yaduas. And now we're going not to the chatas kavua, but we're going to speak about this adjustable chatas. Im haya asher behema, im haya ani oif. And there's sometimes by the oil of yoyed that you even go down another notch. That if a person cannot even, God forbid, afford the bird, and that's called the carbon oil of yoyed. And number 5 in the series, yakrivu hasanhedrin carbon im tov v'hoyru shaloika halacha ba'achas min hachamurais. If regarding one of the severe transgressions for which there is kaddish, they made a mistake in the detail of that transgression, and they ruled collectively that a certain behavior is allowed when it's really not. If the majority of the people did that, so normally that's a chatas, right? They did something, they thought they could, inadvertent, but they can't. But here they did it because of the ruling of the Sanhedrin. It becomes of the responsibility of the Sanhedrin. That topic will be covered also in Hilchos Gagois. And now, beginning with the first chapter, Perek Rishon, let's first cover the sins for which you're chayiv a chatos. This chapter has 5 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Kol ha'over b'shgaga lachas mimitzvos loisase. But it's a transgression sheyesh boy masa, that an action was done through which the transgression was performed. But what type of sin is it? That if a person would have done it b'mezid, there would be a chiyuv of kares. So if the person did it b'shoigeg, harei zechayv la'akriv carbon chatas. U'mitzvah sasehi sheyakriv chatasoi al shkogosoi. Halacha beis. Chol averu shechayavin al zdoine kares, chayavin al shkogosoi chatas chutz misholosh averus, which will be megadef, a person who, God forbid, curses, right, blasphemes. Number 2, umevatel milah, not having a bris milah. Number 3, not bringing the carbon pace. Now, hapesach va milah, zodoine kares, there is no chatos. Why is there no chatos? The reason is b'pnei she'em mitzvahs aseh. And there, by the way, there are the only 2 positive commandments for which transgressing it will bring about a kares. Over there in Vayikra concerning the parish of Chatas. Now, Hamagadef, if a person who blasphemes, why, even though the person is Chayiv Kadas, why is there no Chatos? There's Kadas for Bemezid. Why is there no Chatos for B'Shogeg? And it says explicitly, Lo Oise Bishgaga Lo Oise, someone who does it. And therefore, Hamakabel all of Avodah Be'eloha. The person, God forbid, accepts a false deity as his getch, as his God, the little g. Afa pishu chayv kodes im hoye mezid niskal im kibel bishgaga. Accepted. Accepted is not it's not blaspheming, but it's accepting. It's not doing anything. You're also patam in akarban. Lefish lo yesamasa. The nemar again ba'asoisa achas. Okay. Now. Halacha gimel kol kirisu shebatoira chutz mishalosh kirisu shebaarnu, right? Migadev levatel mila and carbon pesach im over ayochad alachas behem bishgaga, and this bishgaga is going to be better defined in the second chapter. You did it inadvertently, says the Rambam. That is the din. Maybe chatas kavua. Chatas kavua means again that no matter your wealth, you bring the animal. Now, what animal? We'll learn. It depends whether you're a commoner, whether you're a nasi. But whichever category you fall in, that is the type you have to bring, regardless your financial standings. Maybe chatas kavua, chutz mitame she'achal kodesh, or a tame shenichlas lamigdash, sheshneim ein meviam chatas kavua elo carbon oil v'yored, as we will learn in Perek Yud. Halacha Dal. Chatas kavua. What is the meaning of a fixed chatos? Haba min habehema bulvad. It's a carbon that has to be brought from an animal. Carbon oil v'yored, the definition of a adjustable carbon chatos, who carbon she'eno kavua. It's not from an animal. Depends. Maybe chatas behema. If the person cannot afford the animal, he gets to bring a bird. And if he can't even afford that, he brings a asida so'efa of flour. Again, kamosh yisbar, as we learn in Perek Yud. Nimtzei solomei shekol ha'avedas shayachid mevi al shkagos and chatas kavua. And Rambam writes, you'll have a total of Sholosh va'arboim. There's going to be a total of 43. And let's go through the 43. The Rambam is actually going to separate them. It's interesting, between 26 connected to Aroyos, and then 17 by all other sins. 26 and 17 will come to the 43. So let's go. Number 1, let's go through the prohibited sexual relations, for which there's a chiyuv kares b'mezid, so b'chata b'shogeg chatas kavua haba al imoi. Number 2, haba al ein ishtoi. Number 3, haba al ein imah. The mother of this is the mother-in-law. Number 4, haba al ein aviha, mother of her father. 5, haba al bitoi, God forbid. 6, haba al bas bitoi. Number 7, haba al bas benoi. Number 8, haba al bas ishtoi, even though it's not your daughter. Number 9, haba al bas bita. Number 10, haba al bas bina. Number 11, haba ala choisai. Number 12, haba ala choisai, which is only bas eshes aviv, not maternal, only paternal. Yud Gimel, haba ala chois aviv, and haba ala chois imoi, and from the maternal end. 15, haba ala chois ishtoi, sister-in-law. Tezayin habal eshes aviv, even though it's not his mother. Yud zayin habal eshes achi aviv. Yud ches habal eshes benoi. Yutes habal eshes achiv, sister-in-law. Number 20, haba on any married woman. Chaf Aleph halbo ala nida, even if it's one's wife. Number 2, ashoichev im zechur. Number 23, halba al aviv. Now halba al aviv, obviously you'll be chayv to chatois, right? Because it's father and it's also a zechur. 24, halba al achi aviv, same thing. 25, ashoichev im behema, bestiality. Number 26, the final one, ha'isha, woman, ha'mevias behema. So that's 26. Nimsa kol krisus shebarayos ashisha be'esrim. So we have a total of 43. But now we counted 26 are connected to Arois. So B'Sharo Avedos, you have another 17. The Elohei, number 1, Ha'oived Avodah Zarah B'Maisa. As we already spoke out in this chapter, that if a person is Megadif, or if a person, God forbid, is Mekabel all Avodah Zarah B'Eloha, even though it's Isur Kares, there's no Chatas, so it has to be B'Maisa. Number 2, Hanoisen Bizaroi La Moilech. So Moilech was some sort of idol worship that a person gave over his son to a priest belonging to that deity, and they would pass the son through a flame of fire from one side to the other. Doesn't mean that the child got even hurt by that, but it was passing the child through the flame for that avodah zarah. Number 3, bal oiv, right? Someone who divines through oiv, as we'll learn, bal yudoini. But both of them is only if there was an action done. Number 5, hamachal as Shabbos. 6, ha'isem olacha b'yom kippurim. 7, ha'oichel v'shoyse b'yom kippurim. 8, ha'oichel chametz b'pesach. 9, if a person eats chaylev from a behemoth. Number 10, ha'oichel dam, from anything other than a human being. Also midrabanan, not on the oraisa. Yud aleph ha'oichel noiser. Yud beis ha'oichel pigel. Yud gimel ha'shechet kachim chutz la'azara. No, Yud daled, independent where you shechted it, just offering it up chutz la'azara. 15, hamafatim eshemen hamishcha. If a person prepares, right, in the formula that we have in the Torah, the shemen hamishcha. Number 16, hamafatim esaketoides. Number 17, if a person hasoch the shemen hamishcha, so that's 17. 17 and 26 is 43. Hari elu sholosh varboim averos shemeviem al shgogosan chatos kavua. Now, mahu hakorban shemevi hashogig ba'achas me'elu. So here also it depends. The word kavua doesn't mean it's always going to be the same. Kavua means your financial standings has no effect. Im avodah zarah shagag, that was parsha shlach. Then unique, maybe eis bashanos alachatas, you have to bring a female goat. And here there's no difference whether you're a commoner, whether you are a king, the nasi, whether you are a kohen moshuach, kohen moshiach, hakol shavim b'shingas avodah zarah, aval. Other than this and all the other 42, it's a chatos kavua, but here it will depend. This is a parshas vayikra that they have the three categories. If the person was a hedyot, maybe siiras izim, a person has to bring a she goat. A she goat, by the way, doesn't have to be a goat. It can be a goat or it can be a lamb, but a female, a ewe. Oy nekeva, that's the nekeva. No, she goat, nekeva means a female lamb. Min hakivasim, v'zuya chatash, shekol echad me'am ha'aretz amor pashas vayikra. That's the v'im am ha'aretz means here in hedyot. V'im ha'melech u'sheshagag ba'achas me'ela. That's what the Torah calls a nasi. Then he has to bring a male goat. Maybe siirizim lechatas. V'im kohen Mashiach goes both to the kohen gadol and to that kohen that was designated and anointed to inspire the troops prior to battle, then a different, for the same sin, b'shoigeg, maybe par ben bakar, a bull from cattle, lechatas. And it's the whole avodah is done different, and it's burnt, as we will learn, God will. Burnt meaning that since the blood is offered inside, so then the rest of the animal is burnt outside Yerushalayim. Final halach of this chapter. Halacha hey, echad yachid sheshagag ba'achas me'elu. Whether one person fell inadvertently by violating any of the above, or even if it was many people, it's going to be the same. It's same. Shenemar. For example, even if, God forbid, Anshe Medina, Sheshagagu, the Dibu, they thought today is Choil, even though really today is Yom Kippur. So all of them ate and they did Malacha. Now, eating is one Kadis, Chatas B'Shogig. Doing Malacha is another Kadis, Chatas B'Shogig. So Kol Echad, the Echad there, maybe Shtei Chatois, like we said. One for eating on Yom Kippur, one for doing Malacha. And as we said, by the Amo Aretz, by the Hedyot, what do you bring? either kevasois or seiros, a female goat or a female ewe in the first year. By avodah zarah, we said, no matter who you are, you bring an A's. And the Rambam is really just a hinting, and not what if the Sanhedrin gave a erroneous ruling on the above, that will be different. We'll learn about this later. But if people on their own made that mistake without the Sanhedrin, then no matter how few or how many, everyone is judged individually for which they have to bring the Karban Chatas. Now today's third chapter, which is Perek Sheni from Hilchos Shegagos, now we have to define Shoigeg. And there are many parts of that that have to be defined, as we will learn. This chapter has 16 halachas, halacha al. Ein adam chayiv chatas al shgagosoi. The first rule of this chapter is you have to be a shoigeg mitchila va'atzoif. You must be acting inadvertently from the beginning until the end. L'mashal. Aval l'mashagag batchila. But at the end there was a mezid. Oh, you mezid batchila v'shagag b'soif. You can say it's worse. Some of it was b'mezid. Yes, but the Torah only tells us to bring a chatos if that brings about the atonement. So ironically, obviously, if the person is less guilty than a shoigeg, something called an oinus, we'll learn about that later, and there won't be a chiyuv chatos at all. But on the other hand, if the person did something at least parshed mezid, it's more serious than the shoigeg, and therefore the chatos won't bring atonement. Once the prescription of the Torah doesn't bring about full atonement, then that is not done. For example, let's speak about hoitzah. And as we learned that what's the isur midoraisa is to do both the act of akira. You have to lift it and you have to place it down. Lift it in one domain, place it down in another domain, or daladamas b'rishus harabim. What happens if while you made the akira, you knew it's Shabbos, for example, but when you placed it down, you forgot. So half was done b'shogeg, but the first half was done b'mezid, or in the other order. So it's not mitchila va'atzoif, says the Rambam Patur, achiyakard b'shgoga v'yanich b'shgoga v'chein kol kayotze b'zeh. Halacha beis. Ovar aveda. We're speaking about b'mezid. V'yoda, he knew it's not allowed to be done. He knew you can't do that. He knew what he was doing. He didn't know the punishment. So the din is that's shoigeg. And what happens? You bring a chatos. You knew that when you do it b'mezid, you chayiv kares. But he didn't know that if you do it b'shoigeg, you chayiv a korban. B'shogag b'korban, v'lo yoda. He had a doubt. Im chayav al korban lav. Guys, since you knew that you're not allowed to do it, and you knew that the punishment is kares, doing it is called a mezid, which means you don't bring a korban because you did it b'mezid. Sheshigegas korban eino shigaga ba'averos elu shechayaven aleim kares. Now the Rambam is already alluding to, as we have in Masechta Shavuos, if a person by a Shavuos bitui, by Shavuos apikadin, if the person knew they're not allowed to take a false oath, but they didn't know the punishment that if b'shoigeg you have to bring a korban chatos, there it's considered a shoigeg. That's the Rambam's words. That over here, ba'averas elu, here you're not called a shoigeg. Yes, it's called you did it b'mezid, and therefore a korban is not brought. Halachigim. If a person doesn't know the nature of the transgression, you don't know the nature. You know for sure that you sin. You know for sure that you sinned. You just don't know what sin you committed, right? There, even if the act was done b'shoigeg, I knew that I did something. When I did it, I was a shoigeg. Now I know that I sinned. I don't know what I sinned. Again, you're patim karban chatas, because it says by the karban chatas asher chotaba that he transgressed regarding it. Regarding the it, you have to know what the it is. For example, if a person had a chaylev, eat it, chayv kares, and also noisim, eat it, chayv kares. When you ate it, you bechlal didn't know that there's a problem. Now you discovered you ate one of the two. You don't know which one you ate. Another example is Ishtoi Nida and Va'achois Babayis V'Shagad V'Obal Achas Mehen. And now post facto, with whom I don't know. V'Ein Yodua Ezuhu Ezoi Mehen Baal or Shabbos V'Yom HaKippurim Lefanov. V'Asam Lachab Echel Nehem. Today is Tuesday. Yom Kippur was Sunday. Let's just say it doesn't work that way. I know that, but when they were Mekadosh al Piyah, all right, when it could have happened, just as a mashal. Person, I did a malacha 2 days ago or 3 days ago. I'm looking back. I don't know if I did it on Yom Kippur. I did it on Shabbos. Any you do a beizem nas us. Hadei potter mi carbon chatos. That's a gavaldik rule. Halacha dalet. Zok the Rambam chatom. V'noi deloi chetoi. And now the chazaru shechachai. So as long as there was a time that you knew what aveda was committed, you don't have to remember it when you bring the carbon chatos. Hadei maybe chatos l'shem mashuhu. Which is nice because you fulfilled the criteria that you have to know. You knew it. Now you forgot it. I don't care. Halacha hey. Shagag b'shem echad mehen v'hem shnei guf. A person, he did one aveda, but there were two people involved. And he's unaware with which one. But no matter which was the one, it's this. That is the Aveda. You know this. For example, and you'll be chayiv. Shtei nidois. A person had a relation with one of them. He doesn't know with which guf, but he knows that he violated the be'ilah b'nida b'shoyge. The shagag ba'achas mehem ve'en yudua ezehi, or shtei achoisav. Here, yes, chayiv chatos, because sharei yoda atzmi sholchei. And lamazeh doima, the Rambam gives in a mashal, the shtei neiros. You have two candles that are lit. We're speaking about Shabbos or Yom Kippur. Shekiba achas mem, you extinguished one of them. You just don't know which one you put out. So what? You will go even on the Aveda of kiboy. Or a person had two tamchuyin, you had two pots, two dishes. Both of them have chelif. You ate a kazais from one of them. You don't know from which tamchoy, doesn't make a difference because you know what you transgressed. And point is that now that you know, looking back, that what I did was something that may not be done, even though you never had yediyah batchila shezechetu. For example. Now again, will there be exceptions? Again, the Sechta Shavuos, absolutely. We have to have Yediyah Batchila, Yediyah Basoif. But we're speaking about the general rule. For example, a tinik shenishbala ben hagoyim. And because of that, he was raised by goyim, for Gadol. He doesn't even know what Yidden are. He doesn't know what the Yiddish religion is. And v'asam alacha b'Shabbos, where the person ate chaylev or dam, and then God helps, he's rescued. And now he's introduced to the emes. He looks back and he says, "Oy gewalt, I was machal Shabbos," but he never knew, and then he forgot. He never knew. Is kishi yevada loishu Yisrael, and therefore umetzuva al kol elu chayiv lohavi chatas akol avedav avein. Now we're going to learn. We learned to Masechta Shabbos. It's not that you have to bring a carbon chatas for every Shabbos. You're going to bring one carbon chatas. Period. Right? Shigigas Shabbos, Zodayin Malacha. Zodayin Shabbos, Shigigas Malacha. But the concept is that you don't need Yediyah Batchila. And then we'll appreciate this later when we will learn the exceptions where you do have to have Yediyah Batchila or Basoy. Halacha Zay. Right by Tuma. Hashoigig, V'loi Kavana Baroyos, Obim Alachos. Now guys, don't confuse Shoigig and Kavana. Right? Shoigig means that I knew what I was doing. I intended to do what I was doing. I just did not know that what I'm doing is a transgression against Hashem, God Almighty's will. That's called a shoigig. Kavana means I did not even intend to do what I'm doing. I did not even intend to do it. Like the Rambam will give examples. So if a person was shoigig, not only did they not know that they are transgressing, but they didn't even have a mind to do what they're doing. There was no kavana, whether it is by any sararoyos, whether it is by eating prohibited foods. Doesn't make a difference. You are a shoygig. You did it. You did it b'shoygig. You're chayv chatas. Chayv chatas. However, Shabbos is amazing. Shabbos, because of the rule of malachas machsheves, that what is called a malacha only if you did it mindfully, purposefully, as we'll give examples. There, even though yes, chilul Shabbos b'shoygig is chayv chatas kavua, but if there wasn't even kavana, you'll be completely exempt. And then Rambam will give examples for aroyas, macholes, and Shabbos. Ketzad. If a person, that's a very difficult example, because normally we say by aroyas ein kishoy elo ladas, but here's the case: a person was misasekim isha. He's acting casually with a woman, and somehow he had a beila, ubalo like havana, and she's an erva. The act was done without kavanah. Another example: a person thought that there was saliva in one's mouth, which you can swallow on Yom Kippur. Which, if what you had in your mouth was chaylev, you thought it was fat. You didn't even know you have food. You swallowed it. You didn't have in mind to eat, but it turned out it was chaylev. Oh, it's the fact that it was done below kavan is irrelevant. What is relevant is that you did an act which is a transgression. Alama, it was a shoygig. Whether you didn't know that it's chaylev, here in our case you didn't know chaylev is aser. You didn't even know it was chaylev. Okay, so it's a shoygig. But let's go to Hilchos Shabbos. Schaven like v'yas hatolush. Something that you thought is already detached. All you need to do is to lift it up. There's nothing wrong lifting up a detached vegetable from the ground. It turns out that when you picked it up, it was attached. So you're lifting it. That was an act of detaching it. So you didn't even intend to detach. It's not a shoygig. It's less than a shoygig. Here you'll be potter. Why? Because maleches machsheves asra, purposeful labor, mindful labor, intentional labor. As we learn in Hilchos Shabbos, whether it is in Perek Aleph, and we're going to have some more of this also soon in Perek Zayin. All right, halacha ches. Zok the Rambam, kol ha'isa mitzvah min ha'mitzvahs. Another big topic of this chapter: if you are performing a mitzvah, and while you're performing a mitzvah, b'chlal asiyas, while you're performing it, you will, God forbid, you violate an aveda for which you chayv kares. Vishgago. Here also, as the Rambam will define better how we apply this rule, you won't even have to bring a chatas. Why? Here's the rule. Because you did it with the intent of doing a mitzvah. For example, turns out, now that maisa is a maisa of a mitzvah. She was an ida, but the man, the yavam, didn't know. Now, in contrast, if a person has a relation with his wife when she's an ida, you are chayav chatas. You didn't know. Okay, first of all, you should have asked her, right? But on the Yevimtoi, the Rambam already wants to add a nuance that there are some times that you can't get away with, I was doing a mitzvah. Here, there's another layer. A man, he was not yet married to her, so it's not common, he's not comfortable to ask her whether she's an either or not. And since he was doing a mitzvah, he was boil and neither, God forbid, he won't even have to bring a chatos. Again, there's already nuanced cases. The Rambam doesn't give a simple case to know already the exceptions of this rule. So you have two children. One of them is lamol b'shabbos. The other one either was the 8th day was Friday, or the 8th day is going to be on Sunday, which means one of them may not be circumcised on Shabbos, which is an act of many things. Kabbalah, you're drawing blood, etc. You did both, not one, both. Wow. Because since for one of them, in other words, Ushab is the chuya he etzloi. Because for Mila and mitzvah asa, even though there are two bodies here, and you only knew you can do one, but the mitzvah of bris Mila has to be done on the 8th day. So time is pressing. Got to do it. That pressure, I got to do it today. We allow for this umbrella of Eino Medag Day. But that's only when Taka 1 has to be circumcised today on Shabbos. In contrast, Avalim lo yehoya echad mehem roi lo b'Shabbos. Neither of them should have been circumcised today. We can't say, oh, you were doing a mitzvah, then you're going to be chayiv chatos. I'll give you an example. That's what you had two kids, like Pshita, not Pshita, you had two kids also. One of them, the 8th day was on Friday. The other one, the 8th day was on Shabbos. The person circumcised on Shabbos, the Friday one. Let me say better. The person on Friday, by mistake, circumcised the baby that should have been circumcised on Shabbos. Then on Shabbos, he circumcised the one that should have been circumcised on Erev Shabbos. Because when he actually did that circumcision, no one here had a mitzvah. Very good. Halacha 9. Uman here is an expert moil. He's coming to do a bris milah at the end of Shabbos. It's before sunset. Now you have to do it on the 8th day. But the bris milah takes a couple of minutes. This guy came a few minutes before sunset, and they told him, don't do it. So you're going to begin now, you're only going to finish it until after Shabbos. Now, what justifies Kabbalah, the mitzvah? You're not going to get the mitzvah, it's too late. To which this expert moyel, this uman responds, no, I'm an expert, I can do it quick. Here the din is, im loy hishlim ella im yitzias Shabbos, if he began, but he was unable to finish it until after Shabbos, yes, chayiv chatos. Why? Because they warned him that there isn't enough time, implying that if they would not have warned him, he would be potter. Why would he be potter? Because of this general rule that we introduced in Halacha Ches, Mepnei she'asa b'reshus. Halacha Yud. Hamoitzi esalul b'yom harishon shel chag. You carried hoitzah on the first day of yantus that falls on Shabbos. We're speaking about Bisman Beis Hamikdash, where they would take the lulav in the Beis Hamikdash. That's very important. In other words, you're doing a mitzvah, and you ended up that's an application. Very good. If you're shechter or carbon pesach on the 14th day, that falls out on Shabbos, which is something that you have to do. But after you shechted, you found out that the owners removed their connection with that animal, or the owners died. In that case, you shouldn't have shechted it, or they became tummy kraydem shchit. No, if it's treifa begolui, the shechet should have seen it. But a treifa can happen in a hidden place, like nakov ma'ayim. Right, the intestines were perforated, the lungs were perforated. That's another application. You were doing a mitzvah. Why? In contrast, if the animal is discovered after shechita that it's blemished, now we learned before, all of the blemishes are by definition halachically. The balmum is something that's exposed. In other words, it's something that you should have seen. Or even if it was treifa, some of the 8 treifos are beseser, some of them are begoli. You should have looked. You can't say, I was doing a mitzvah. We demand something of you. If you shecht the Pesach on Shabbos, oh God, this is gewaldig. But you did it, in other words, you had in mind that this is a carbon shlamim, you shechted it, you thought it's a shlamim, and you shechted it l'shem shlamim. You're going to be potter. Because since mipnei shahazevach kosher, wow. Now I know everyone is thinking, what are you talking about? First Mishnah and Zvachim, right? Kol hazvachim shenishchatu shaloi l'shman is arkeshedim, but they're not oila la'ba'olim l'shem their obligation. Chutz michatos u'pesach. But hold on. Here we're speaking about someone who made a mistake and thought it's a shlamim. That's different. Since you made a mistake, and based on your mistake, thinking it's a shlamim, you had in mind you're doing it l'shem shlamim. There, the zevach is kosher because of a rule she'akiras shemoi b'to'us einoi akira, as we will learn in Ilchas Psulei Hamikdashim Perek Tezvav. However, Allah Yudbei shachat zvacham achedim, and you did it l'shem pesach b'to'us. Here the opposite. You had a shlamim. You thought it's a carbon pesach, and you shechted it l'shem pesach. Here you won't fulfill your obligation. You won't. You didn't fulfill your obligation. So now it depends. If Carbon Pesach, if that is an animal type that could have been valid for a Carbon Pesach, let's again apply the rule of halacha ches. Here we'll say you did a violation, but you're going to be potter from a chatas because you thought it's a Pesach and you were doing a mitzvah. Sheshachet b'reshus. But if the animal is not to the uyim, that knows you, it's expected for you to know something. Like we learned before, begashmius, if the animal is a balmum begoli, you have to know some halachas. If they're not to the uyim, for example, the animal was a female, or the animal is in its second year, Carbon Pesach has to be male in the first year. Chayiv chatos. That's important. In other words, it's a davar pashut. Any halacha that's a davar pashut, you should have known. And if you didn't know, you can't get away by saying, I thought I was doing a mitzvah. Very good. But you shechted it. And Carbon Pesach has to be slaughtered lo'ichlav. Not people that for people that were not counted on the animal, as we learned in Ilchas Pesach, as we will learn, or la'arelim, or l'tmeim. These are all halachas that everyone should know. Chayiv chatos, and you can't say asa b'reshus. Shkatei la'achlav v'shaloi la'achlav, lemenuyav v'shaloi lemenuyav. For those who are circumcised and also wrongfully la'arelim, l'tmeim v'l'tahoirim. Just to speak about the seder. In other words, that Rambam always mentioned first the good and then the bad. Here it's the bad and the good. Now, pater, you know why? Because in such a case, as we will learn in Ilchas Pesach, the carbon is kosher. Givaldik. And since the carbon is kosher, you violated nothing. Sharei Pesach kosher v'chein kol chayes abazeh. Allah yudgim. Shoichet b'Shabbos karbonei sibur shaloi l'shman. You bring a carbon tamid, but you don't have a mind of carbon tamid. You're chayiv achatas. Well, everyone knows on Shabbos you can only bring Carbonation sibur, and you can't say asa b'reshus. That minimum knowledge was expected for you to know. The yakted him. Now, what should you do? Now the din is like this: that when you shech the carbon shaloi l'shma, even though you did not fulfill the obligation of that carbon, but other than Pesach and Achatas, like we just quoted the first Mishnah on Zvachim, the carbon is kosher, which means the emurim have to be brought. Now, normally we say that Aviva mitzvah b'shaita, and you should bring it during the day. Here you can't bring it during the day because it's no longer exempted. It's not a carbon sibur that's doicha Shabbos. So v'yakter imulam la'erev. Okay. You brought it l'shem carbon sibur, but you brought more than what's necessary. So then your chayiv chatas alot tesefes. Everyone knows how many carbonis tzibur have to be brought. Halacha yudal shochat carbonis yachid that are not doiches Shabbos. Bishgaga here also chayiv chatas. But what's going to be amazing is that when the person was machalal Shabbos and the chayiv chatas, it doesn't mean that this carbon is invalid and therefore v'habasar muter b'hano. Only thing is you're not braided the dam. Amazing. In other words, there's an isur of shvus by throwing the blood, and a carbon that may not be brought. They were not mated. We ain't shvus b'mikdash, not over here. So the question is, what do you mean habasar muter? Guys, if you don't do zrikas adam, then you can't do anything with the meat and a chanami. But it's not a intrinsic isur, and therefore ve'imover v'zarek gamam l'shman. Then all l'balam l'shem chayve v'yakter emurim la'erev, and then v'habasar yach. Because the meat is inherently mutar bana. And coming back, since you should have known that you're not allowed to do it, we don't say b'reshus asa. The yavi hashoichet chatas al shkogasoi. Because the Rambam is limiting the whole time. When do we say the rule that what? That kol ha'oisa mitzvah min ha'mitzvahs, etc. Pater carbon chatas she'asa b'reshus. And when don't we say it? Allah tezvav hoy l'fanav shtei behemas. Shel tzibur. And one of them is Chusha, and one of them is Shmeina. And v'hoyser chayves hayoyim ba'achas, bein chatos, bein oilo, and v'shogag v'shochat ashtayin. Now listen to this. If the person shechted the Chusha batchilam, which is something that he should not have done, and then he says, Upa, I should have brought the Shmeina, and he shechted the Shmeina. Here, wow, yes, he'll be patim carbon chatos. Not only that, wow. Now, just to know what's going to happen. In such a case, when they shechted the chusha first, if they're going to now shech the shmeina and do the rest of the avodah with the shmeina, what will happen with the chusha is it's going to become psulei hamikdashim. It's going to have to be burnt, and retroactively, it's going to make the shechita invalid. Nevertheless, because of the mitzvah min hamufchar, wow, to bring a shmeina, they tell you lechatchila to do it. And therefore, coming back, you're for sure patim in carbon chatas. The point of halacha tezvav is the opposite. If they shechted the shmeina tchila, so they did the mitzvah min and erroneously they shechted the chusha. It's not always a mitzvah. No, there's only one carbon. Chayiv chatas ala tesefes. Nimtzeis harishayna hashmeina. Now, if he shechted the shmeina, and then they did the chusha. So as far as we know now, you chayiv chatas. Now we happen to discover that shmeina is a treif, and we never would have known before. Which means that while we shechted the chusha, it appeared that it was a sin. Now it turns out it wasn't. This is a moededik halacha. Bottom line is, the bottom line counts. Now that we discovered that the chusha was good, because the shmeina wasn't, and by the way, there isn't another animal available for where we're going to apply what we have in halacha tezvav that we're going to tell them havei shmeina. That's it. The mitzvah is through the chusha. So then you did the mitzvah, and for sure you put the mechatos. Same concept will be a person throw out a net to trap fish, which is asur on Shabbos. He didn't know, let's say it's Shabbos. So when he threw the net out, it's something for which he'll be chai b'chatas, right? Turned out that when he brought the net up, fish came out, but a baby, you saved someone's life. Doesn't make a difference whether you knew that there's a baby that fell into the water. You never even knew that. Turns out, in other words, it's just like if you later discovered that the shmeina was a treifa, same thing over here. Turns out that you did not sin. You're going to be completely exempt because now the Rambam is alluding to, the Rambam is into something very powerful. That the reason why you're potter is because even if you wouldn't have had a tina come up, the whole thing was an act b'shoigeg. Turns out at the end that not only did you not do a sin, you did a mitzvah. That's when you're pater mechatos. Abed, listen to this, guys. If a person had kavana to trap fish, he had kavana, even if it turned out that you saved the baby, guys, you'll be chayiv kares. Wow. And the final halacha tezayin of this chapter, mish oil afana v'leila pesach, soli shel pesach, which is the mitzvah to eat. And you also have in front of you noiser from other karbanos that is already noiser that may not be eaten. And you have in mind to eat the tzali, which is a mitzvah. You ended up doing a shoygeg and you ate the noiser. Again, one might have thought, okay, we learned in halacha ches that ha'isa mitzvah min ha-mitzvahs. Ubechlal asiyos anasas aveda. That example was a person was boil his yavama as a nida. That's different. That he did do was only one mitzvah here. It's not expected for him to find out whether she's a need. It's not comfortable. But over here, yes, chayev chatos. Why? Because you didn't do a mitzvah. The other piece is the mitzvah. You ate the noiser. Chayev chatos. Sharei loy osam mitzvah b'achila zu v'chein kol kayoytze bozeh. Gavaldik. To be continued.